So here we are. It's early morning and I'm standing on the side of a path with my Shangaan trackers, and we're looking down at the ground almost in disbelief. We've never seen so many gook tracks all in one place. They seem to come from every direction and they seem to go off in every direction. It's difficult to tell the age. So we decide that what we'll do is we'll follow a path leading northwards, and the tracks appeared to be the freshest of the lot there, and we just said we'd see where they lead us. And so we set off on the spoor. And time passes and we find ourselves approaching a ploughed field. We're in what is called an African purchase area. All is quiet. There's no sign of any impending danger or anything, but we're keeping our eyes open, and the path we're on leads us alongside this ploughed field. We then find a fence, and we continue moving along the side of the fence until we come to an opening, and we find that the tracks lead through this opening. And so I step through. I'm in front of my men, and ahead of me I can see the ploughed field is very broken, and it drops down out of sight towards some riverine forest that I can see. On my right hand side is a large field of standing maize, and it's quite high, higher than a man. And on my left hand side the ground drops again away to some trees. And I'm just starting to walk forward, and I know my men are behind me, when all of a sudden, quite unexpectedly, a figure steps out from between these stalks of maize, probably about maybe 150 meters in front of me, which is not an awful distance, but I can see it's a gook. And he doesn't look over his shoulder, he doesn't look left, he doesn't look right. He just steps out from between the maize, turns to his right, and walks away from us. They have a certain way of walking when they think that we might be in the area. It's they're almost hunched forward, and they got their head down, and they're walking purposefully as though they're going somewhere, and they're not involved in anything going on around them, and so you mustn't suspect them. It's very difficult to put this in words, but once you've seen it, you recognize it. And I saw immediately that this gook was in a little bit of a hurry to get somewhere, but he was stumbling across this broken ground. Well, all of this, of course, happens in a split second. I raised my weapon to my shoulder, took a bead at a point just between these shoulder blades, and I pulled him. Now, I don't know what happened, whether he happened to stumble at that precise moment, or whether my shooting was just really rotten that day. I don't know, but I missed. And instead of hitting him where I'd aimed for, the bullet passed beneath his left elbow and hit the ground in front of him. Well, of course, as you might imagine, this certainly got his attention, and he hastened his departure. He didn't even throw a glance over his shoulder. He just started jinking left and right, and weaving and ducking. And I fired again, and I fired again, and I thought, what's wrong with my guys? Why aren't they opening up? But I knew that perhaps they were crowded in that opening, and I stepped forward a few paces, and I continued firing. But I couldn't hit this guy, and then my guys opened up, and there was dust all around him. Bullets were flying over his head, to the left of him, to the right of him. Some were going between his feet, because I could see how the ground was thrown up in front of him, and still he carried on, dodging left, dodging right, ducking, weaving, diving, and none of the bullets seemingly could hit him. And I emptied a whole magazine, 20 rounds, without hitting the man, and I couldn't believe that this was possible. And quick as a blink of an eye, he disappeared out of sight into the dead ground, and then presumably made a beeline for the river. And we stopped firing, and we just stood there. I was absolutely amazed. One of the one of the men started laughing, and he said, "He'll never forget this. This is like another birthday for him." And I said, "He'll never forget it." Well, I'll never forget it either. How many rounds did you fire? How many rounds did you fire? How many did you fire? And well, I won't tell you how many we fired, but it must have been some sort of a record for shots fired in the Rhodesian Bush War without getting a kill. And I said to the MAG gunner, while I was shooting at him, I didn't hear the MAG going off, and I thought, let me just grab it and put it on my shoulder, and you could have pulled him. It would have deafened me, but at least we'd have got the guy. So he said, "You're crazy." And I said, it was either that or just run him down, because I could run in those days. And I mean, it would have been this, I should have really done that. If I had run at him, I could have just put a bullet in his side or in his back, and that would have been the end of the story. And they said to me, "You are so lucky that you didn't try that, because we were under fire ourselves from the trees over there on the left. We weren't firing at him, not all of us. Some of us were returning fire." And I said, "You're joking. You want to tell us we were being shot at as well?" They said, "Yeah, didn't you know?" Well, with all the excitement and all the noise going on around me, I had no idea that we were under fire ourselves. But well, I never said a word about this when we got back to base camp. I mean, I was even a bit embarrassed to phone in and say that we'd had a contact. It was hardly a contact, and it was many years later that I read a blog from another Rhodesian soldier where he'd had a similar experience, and I thought, well, I'm not the only one, So I know they say what goes on in the bush should stay in the bush, but sometimes it's good to talk about these things. And it still amazes me today when I think about it that we discharged all those rounds and we missed the man. Well, of course, this happened from time to time. I can recall reading, I think it was the paymaster from the Arcturus mine that was ambushed one afternoon as he drove to Salisbury. And an incredible amount of bullets were fired at him by the Gooks. And he survived the attack. His vehicle was riddled with bullet holes, I believe. But, one sort of expects that from the terrorists. We always said, you're fine. They won't get you as long as they're aiming at you. But for us to have that same sort of experience, it was really very shocking. Well, I don't know what happened to that Gook, whether he survived the war or not, but I suppose with his luck he probably did. But I have to tell him, my friend, you are flipping lucky we didn't get you that day.